Okay, well, welcome. Sorry about the technical difficulties to this point. Hopefully, we've got them done for the evening. Um, we're glad to have everybody here tonight for the Spartanburg County Public Library's genealogy series. Tonight, we will continue our genealogy building blocks with What is Your Question? If you missed last month's first Monday session, that was our genealogy building blocks on options for building your tree, both on software as well as online. And then next month, we'll be talking about evaluating resources in our December building block. We're glad that you're here, and we're going to jump right into things in just a second. If you have technical issues or questions, please feel free to contact Cheryl Bland in chat. If you have questions, content questions, feel free to send them to either Cheryl or to myself. And maybe you might have the option to show them to everybody. I'm not sure how this one is set up. So please feel free to ask. I will catch those at the end of the presentation. We are glad you're here. This is being recorded, so it can be placed on the library's YouTube page. We have a genealogy channel there, and that includes all of the talks that I have given over the last year and a half or so, as well as some genealogy on the go sessions done by my colleague, Kristen Bennett. So we are excited you're here, and we're going to jump right in on what is your question. So the goal for this session is to talk a little bit about how to focus your research for better results. Genealogy at its base is a series of reference questions. You ask a question about a person in your family, a location where they lived, that kind of thing. And then you get an answer or you don't get an answer. And then you move on to the next question. It's a little bit of a circular reference pattern. You can't answer all of the questions that you have at once. So you do need to be specific and you need to focus on what you're doing. And so one of the things we'll talk about tonight is focus on your current question and then when to move on to the next question or set of related questions. So we get a lot of people in the Kennedy room who come in with the huge picture. I want to research my family. Great. You got to narrow it down a little bit because everybody has you and 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16, 32, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it grows exponentially each generation. In addition to the fact that while I only have 1 sibling and my mother only has 1 sibling, my father was an only child, but his mother was one of 4, his father was one of 3, and the next generations were getting into families of 10 and 12 children. So you're going to need to, again, focus. Now, as you get started, we do recommend that you gather the information you have on yourself, your spouse, your children, your parents, and your grandparents, because most of us know at least a little bit about all of those people. Then you have to make the discovery and make peace with the fact that you can't research everyone at the same time. It's just physically impossible. You can't. You need to pick someone to start with. Doesn't mean you are tied to only researching that for the next however long. Just for the moment, pick somebody to research. And then when you hit a roadblock, when you run out of information or you need to move to something else for whatever reason, you might be traveling to the area where another line lived and you might want to stop by a cemetery or 2 on your way, then you can move and start with the next person, but you have to research 1 step at a time. So when you look at what is available, and what you want to look at, you need to be realistic about what information is there. Look at what you know. What time frame did the person live in? Where did they live? Are they in the era of vital records? Are they before the era of vital records? And for the most part, that's 20th century and 21st century is the era of vital records. And prior to that, at least in the South, is pre-vital records. South Carolina started recording births and deaths in 1915, a year after my grandfather was born. And then marriages started recording in 1911. This is kind of late for someone who's used to New England research, where town and township records may very well exist for a whole lot longer than that. But you need to kind of figure out what information might be available so you know what to ask for when you're doing your research or contacting a library, archive, county clerk, court, or historian, etc., or even a cousin. So how do you find out what might be available for a given location or in a given time period? The Family Search Research Wiki for that location and or that topic can be a fantastic resource and is relatively comprehensive. If you find errors, because it is a wiki, you can register and you can choose to help improve that wiki if you so desire. Another resource is Cindy's List, which is, it started out pre-Google when it was a lot harder to find online resources and other resources, and has just continued for, I think she just celebrated 25 years, something like that. It's been going on quite a long time. And, but it's great because if you need resources on a new region of the world or the country, she has helpful sets of links for a lot of topics, many topics. And the web addresses for both of those are in the handout. How-to guides have been written for any given state and many countries. There used to be Ancestry's Red Book that is now part of the Ancestry Learning Center, which can also be helpful. It's just not as easy to access as the Family Search Research Wiki. And that can tell you when county lines changed and what county did this new county come out of and various things like that. Some of the more well-known guides, National Genealogical Society has a series that they're publishing for each state. The National Daughters of the American Revolution has colonial state guides. And then there are many others. A really good guide for South Carolina in general is Brent Holcomb's, I think, Research Guide to South Carolina, I think is the name of it. I forgot to look when I was at the library today. You can ask library staff what types of resources are available for that location and time period. It can be really helpful because they work in that area and they would know. Now, if you're asking a librarian in South Carolina what the resources are available for some county in Northern California, it's going to be an unusual librarian that just knows that right off. They may have to do some research or point you to some places to do your own research, because we can help you, library staff can help you do your research and provide some information, but we're not a paid genealogist. We're a librarian. We are helping you learn the skills to do your own research. You can also Google your question. Please note that this is often the least effective unless you know about reliable websites versus clickbait. Now, even some reliable websites are clickbait in a Google list. Especially some of the newspaper sites, newspapers.com, Genealogy Bank, some of those, they will tell you, hey, there's an article that has this and this search word in that. It may not be your person, it may not be your location, it may not be your time period. And they're going to want you to subscribe in order to find that out. It can be costly. So understand free resources. And if something starts asking you to pay them money to get the results, maybe take a step back and call your local reference librarian and, hey, is this a reputable source? How can I get this information? Does this information exist? So start learning some basic web safety as well. Google is a great resource, don't get me wrong, but it can also lead you very astray very quickly. So now we're going to talk about the topic of the evening: how to ask a question of a librarian, archivist, or other person who might be able to help. And this is just kind of the broad header for this whole next section, because as I was putting this together, I realized we needed to talk about some best practices. So I've got a number of them. So absolute number one, remember to frame your question as a question and not a demand. I can tell you that at least once a week, we have someone walk in our room, in the Kennedy room at the library, and say, give me everything you have on the Smith family. And I'm using Smith generic there. You fill in whatever family name. That's a demand. And that's too broad. That's a huge question. We have entire books about various Smith families because there are a lot of different families and they aren't always related to each other. So it's a question. So best practice number one, remember to phrase it as a question and not a demand. Think about, before you're asking the question, is this a type of information that this person, library, or archive might have access to? Or are you asking for a referral? If you walk into my library in the upstate of South Carolina and ask me a question about California, where many families who came through Spartanburg in the early 1800s have landed in California in the 21st century, I can give you some referrals to libraries, archives, etc. in California, or I can point you to databases that allow you to look up information that might be available from California, Ancestry, Family Search, etc. But I'm not going to be a subject matter expert on California. So it's one of those things, you gotta ask the right question in the right place. Before you visit an archive or a library, you probably, especially if you're going to travel any distance to get there, might want to go online and check the library's website, check their online catalogs for family histories or things you might want to look at. Check some research guides if they have some posted. Any guidelines for their research room? Is it pencils only? Can you take your laptop in? Are they not restricted? Are they only open in their genealogy or local history room the hours that a particular staff member is in the building? Or are they open like ours, all the hours the library is open? Especially in this time frame, you do want to check, because some library systems in South Carolina are still not open to the public other than for curbside pickup. So you need to ask before you drive for 3 hours, because you might be disappointed. Just because they were open and staffed 10 years ago, the last time you visited them, does not mean they are currently open. So do check, call ahead, etc. We continue to request and recommend appointments. If you have something more than, I want to look at a particular book on your shelf, or get on Ancestry, because we have archival materials and other things that we can get for you on many of the families in the area. Not all of them. We're working on it. But it really helps if you give us notice. Any of our archival items, we do recommend a minimum of 24 to 48 hours request, because those are in rooms where not all of the library staff have access. So when you go into the room, do a little bit of a room read. Look around, observe what else is happening in the room. Are there other researchers needing assistance from staff? Are staff actually helping other researchers? Is it one staff member in the room? Are there multiple staff members available? Is the staff member on the desk on the phone? If you walk in the room and start talking to the person who's on the phone, that just means they can't understand either person who's trying to talk to them and get information from them. Be polite. Is there a sign-in process and/or form? Right now, we are using both. We are working on how to streamline that a little bit. Are there posted policies or procedures at this point? Are you supposed to wear a mask? Doesn't matter. Does the room close for lunch on Saturday, which ours does, from 1 to 2, because of staffing? So just know you need to be an observant researcher. Are there lockers for your items, which may not be allowed at the research table? You see this more in special collections and archives, but I do mention it because there are genealogy rooms at various libraries that do not allow you to take your backpack and your computer and your whatever in, because too much stuff has walked out in someone's backpack. So, best practice, look around, check. If staff says, can you please leave your drink or your food or your backpack in a certain location, please follow what the staff asks. Do ask for permission before taking photos of the room or documents. Some libraries and archives do allow photos with your phone or camera, and some do not. Again, ask, follow what you're told. Do not take photos of people unless you have specific permission to do so. Other researchers have not agreed to be in your pictures, so if you can take a picture where either that person's back is to you, they are not recognizable, or just don't take pictures of other people. It's just a best practice. Follow guidance from staff. I've already alluded to this. If you are doing something not allowed, even if a previous staff member let it slide and another staff member asks you to stop, please stop and ask how to accomplish what you want within the room guidelines. I ran into this when I was researching in, I think it was in Belfast, in their public library over in Northern Ireland on my sabbatical in 2019, where I did not realize I needed to sign an agreement on copyright, and that any picture I took was one photo and I wasn't allowed to make copies of that photo for anyone else, and various copyright restrictions that are common in the UK. They're the law in the UK, that differ from what I'm used to here in the States. The second staff person, they had a desk shift change. They came over and said, I'm not sure if you have signed this paper. And I said, oh, no, I hadn't. I'm sorry. What can I sign? I didn't realize I was breaking any of the guidelines. Thank you for letting me know. If you're nice about it, it makes things a whole lot more smooth. The staff doesn't want to have to call somebody down. The staff doesn't want to have to tell someone they're not following the guidelines and they're not being a good team player. So you as the patron need to be responsive to those things if someone says something to you. Do remember that the frontline staff, the person at the desk, is not usually the one who has any control over the room guidelines. If you're frustrated that you can't do something, don't take it out on them. Ask to speak to someone who can explain why the procedures exist or who might be able to grant an exception. They might not. It just depends. For instance, photographs. Okay, well, we do allow you to photocopy it. So yes, instead of photocopying, you can make a photo if you pay us the 15 cents a copy that you would pay for the photocopy. You know, those types of things, sometimes if you're nice, there can be an exception or a meet in the middle kind of situation. The more demanding you get, the less likely they are to bend, just like a lot of other things in life. A lot of these archives and libraries do depend on copy money to help keep the lights on. Our library, fortunately, does not rely on that. And right now we are offering some free copies each day. And so that's been a nice treat for some of our out-of-town folks when they come to visit us. So please and thank you go a huge long way toward getting great assistance from staff instead of the bare minimum of assistance from staff. When you come in and you're demanding and you get in someone's face, especially in the South, that's not likely to get you a whole lot of help. Now, that doesn't mean you have to come in and be super syrupy sweet or anything, but just be polite. Have common courtesy and it will get you a whole long way. Up front, if you haven't seen online what their copy costs and those processes are, ask. We would rather you ask, what's your policy about, can I take photographs? Do I need to make photocopies? Is there a book scanner I can use? Those types of questions so that there's no surprise when, like at our county courthouse, when the clerk of court's office, it's 50 cents a page. Actually, I think it's $2 a page in one of the offices. So $2 a page, 50 cents a page, or $1 a page really adds up very quickly. Makes our 15 cents a page look very cheap. Do confirm payment method as well. Some places can't accept a certain payment type. Some can only accept credit cards. We can't accept credit cards. We don't have that ability set up. Some can accept checks. Some can only accept cash. So again, before you run up $25 of copy cost, know kind of how you're going to pay for it. Another best practice, and this came to my mind this week, actually, we received a fabulous thank you note on Friday that was just so wonderful. But if a staff member or members go above and beyond, it is always appropriate to write a thank you note or an email that will make their day and just say, hey, thanks. I was in your room the other day and you really helped me find XYZ. It really helped my research trip go much more smoothly. And with what you referred us to the next library over or whatever, I was able to find what I was looking for. This can help as employees are up for evaluations, but also, I mean, it just makes somebody's day to have a genuine thank you. If you want to make a donation or a gift, please check to see what institutional policies or procedures might be. We are a governmental institution, which severely limits what we can accept personally as a gift. If it is like $10 and under, we can keep it for the department. If it is over $10, maybe 15, a gift card or whatever, we have to turn that in to administration to HR. Those are used for raffles for staff day and things like that. But it's because we are government employees that there are dollar amounts that we have to abide by for free or gifts or speakers fees or things like that. So if you would like to give a donation, ask. So a gift card is great. Sometimes that could be used as a like staff meeting treat for the whole department, something like that. Donations to the department, we have funds that we place those in, and those help buy our over and above materials, may right now be put toward, say, microfilm of the 1950 census or something like that, that it might not be just an everyday kind of thing, but it's a fund that helps support the room. We also have endowment funds, but we are unusual in a library setting for that. And the endowment funds do help provide services for our archival and genealogy and local history things. But again, ask or check with administration of the library or archive. So as you're getting ready to ask your question, you've made it to the research room, you've looked around, think, prepare before you ask your question. Put that skeptical thinking cap on so that you can see, okay, I am going to Spartanburg so that I can look for my Smith family who lived in Spartanburg, I think somewhere in the era of 1820 and 30, because I know by 1842 they're in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, etc. So think about what you're looking for. How can you phrase your query? As I said, make sure it's a question, not a demand. Think through how much background information is actually necessary for the person to be able to assist me with my query. A side note on this, no one needs 45 minutes of your general family history to answer a question on a specific line in a specific location. Now, there needs to be a back and forth between the library staff person and the researcher as to some of the information, and we'll get to how some of that works. Limit how much you ask for at one time. 1 to 3 related questions is the absolute maximum. So, and I say 1 to 3 related questions. It's I'm looking for John Smith. He was in the area of Spartanburg between 1820 and 1844. And I'd really like to find out anything related to his marriage or his death. Very focused on the one person. Allow the librarian a chance to clarify that they understand what you're asking. And this process is called a reference interview. So there's a back and a forth in that interview, and that allows for you to give information. It allows for them to reply and say, this is what we have. Have you looked at deeds, probate, etc.? And then you can say, yes, I've looked at that, or no, I haven't. So again, it's a give and take. It's not you walking in and monopolizing the poor staff person who's sitting at the desk being very polite, and they might be interested in your story too. Otherwise, they wouldn't be at the genealogy desk. But they don't need 45 minutes about the fact that everyone in the last 5 generations has been in California, but you're looking for this guy in Spartanburg in 1820 to 40. So think about how much background information is actually necessary. If the staff member needs more information, they will ask for the information they need. So, how much background do you really need? Well, what is the necessary information so that someone can begin to help you answer your question? Anybody remember in school where it was who, what, where, when, why, and how? Well, we don't answer all of those. The why is pretty evident for a genealogy patron. Why are you doing this? You want to find out more about your family history. The why is not as evident sometimes if someone is doing school research. So that why is a little bit more important. But if you have already said you're doing family history, then the why has been answered. Who are you asking about? Focus on one generation, one family unit at a time. Where did they live? Did they live in Spartanburg? Did they live in Reedville? Did they live in Union? Did they live in California? Where did they live? Because that helps the staff member know what types of resources in their room and what databases they might be pointing you to. The general time frame. And I don't mean that you have to know that they were born in 1815 and died in 1888. If you know that, that's great. But general time frame, because resources for the 21st century, for the 20th century, for the 19th century, 18th century, and 17th century are very different. So general time frame, especially in areas where the genealogical time frame of people living there is a little bit longer. I had a lot of culture shock when I moved from the Virginia, North Carolina area to Kansas. Kansas was 150 years old, celebrated while I lived there. Virginia had Europeans living there by 1607. So 400 years versus 150 years. It's a little bit of a different time frame. So knowing at least 2.5 decades or so, half a century or so, is kind of helpful. What basic resources have you already checked? Do you have them on the census? Do you have a deed? Do you have a will? Do you have probate? Have you already looked at those? Because that again can help the staff member point you to different unique or other resources so that you're not just duplicating your research. So I gave the necessary information and asked my question. Now what? Okay. Now you stop talking and you listen to the staff member and let them allow them to make their recommendations of resources. Are they able to point you to resources to answer the question? If they can't, then this forms the next round of the reference interview. And so this is the basis for the next set of questions. Well, if you don't have resources for that, then what else might you have about this person? Sometimes it's not available here. You're going to need to go to the state archives. Sometimes it's South Carolina didn't keep that information prior to 1911 or 1915. Some cities did, but not the state and not the rural areas. So you can clarify things, you can answer questions. If they do have recommendations, then look at the recommended resources. So you've now looked at the recommended resources. They didn't have the information. Now what? Are there additional resources to look at? So if there aren't any vital records, might there be church records? Now, church records, especially in the South, can be a little bit dicey because Baptists didn't keep things like births. Because baptism is at the time of belief, which is often as an adult, not infant baptism. So you're not going to find births necessarily written into most Baptist records. So you're going to have to look at what might be available. Just because you're Presbyterian does not mean everyone has been Presbyterian ad nauseum for years and generations before you. They may have gone to the closest Protestant church, not the Presbyterian church. You never know. You got to keep asking the question. Is there an additional way to ask or look at the question? So sometimes you need to step back and reframe and look at, okay, so I can't find the marriage in anything about the husband or the wife. Can I look at the wife's potential parent or grandparent and see if anything in their probate tells if there was a previous marriage or that kind of thing, or if the son-in-law shows up in an unexpected person's probate. There are indexes for some of this. Some of it may be happenstance. Sometimes you get lucky. If you have exhausted the current research options for this particular question, then you can formulate the next question. So, and so you begin the process again. And again, it's circular research, and you're going to be asking very similar questions for each of the people in your tree, each of the couples, each of the families. So just know that the more you do this process, hopefully the better you'll get at it. And some precautions and some reminders. So it is not the responsibility of the staff to do the research for you. I will say this again. It is not the responsibility of the staff to do the research for you. We are responsible to provide resources and to teach you the skills to be able to use those resources. You need to be willing to learn research techniques such as how to use a computer database and/or how to use a microfilm machine. These are basic machines, interfaces that we use in current research, and staff is not responsible to do the research for you. Staff is also not responsible for reading you all of the handwritten documents. If you cannot read handwriting, it's a skill that does develop over time. And we do realize that there's a good chunk of people younger than me who were never taught how to read or write handwritten documents, just printed and typed. This is a disservice to so many researchers and potential researchers. But if you want to do anything in local history, in genealogy, earlier than the 20th century, you have to be willing to learn and to try to learn how to read handwritten documents. Now, staff can provide an opinion on specific words or phrases. You can ask, hey, am I understanding this document correctly? We all have different levels of what we're looking at. And if it's your first time looking at a deed, it can be very confusing. But try. Just like so many other things in life, if you are making a genuine attempt to do the research and understand what you're looking at, then staff is more willing to help you and coach you in that. If you're just sitting there refusing to touch the mouse and saying, well, how do you get it to the next page? Well, you do this. Well, will you do that for me? Maybe. Generally speaking, staff might do that to get you out of the room, and you're not going to get good help. But if you are genuinely trying, or if you have articulated, hey, I have a physical issue post-stroke that I can't work my finger on the mouse very well. If the staff member is not bouncing between 5 other researchers and you, they may be able to help you a little bit more, but it takes you communicating with the staff member what the situation is. I mean, we see it all. We see it all. So other things to remember, you may find that staff have access to materials not in the online catalogs, especially if there are archival collections, archives of primary source documents, family, professional collections, etc. Those often come in very large batches, and it takes a while to process those. And because it is not front and center for many archives, some stuff can sit in a box in the back for decades, unfortunately. Our archive is young enough that we've got a pretty good handle on things, but we do have collections that are not as well processed and findable as we would like. So staff may know that, well, we have this Williams family collection that came in of a genealogy researcher who had done work on multiple sides of her family, and it was well organized research for the most part. And the daughter donated it to us because that was what the will said she needed to do. And we were able to accept it because it was well organized. And because we have an archival collection and we have an archivist who could then process it and get it to a findable state. Now it's folder level, notebook level, really processed. It's not page level processed. Very few archives have the time or personnel to do that. But a staff member may know when you're asking about family X, Y, or Z that they have the papers of one part of that family. Staff may be more familiar with local resources and suggest avenues of research that you haven't followed yet. We have our regular resources that we recommend regularly. So deeds, probate, wills, certain of the church records that we have access to. We know which archives in the area have certain things, and we may have to send you to one of the other archives or call that archivist and ask, hey, do you have XYZ? And help a researcher connect with the information that they need. And it may just not be at our place. However, we may also be able to say, those resources have now been digitized by Family Search, and here is how you find them. On your computer, from your house. Some of those you may need to be in a affiliate library or a family history center, but staff may be. Now I say may because I've been in South Carolina for 7+ years now. I am still, and I had South Carolina genealogy experience prior to that because 1/4 of my family has been in South Carolina for a couple centuries. But some of our researchers come in and they know more about the local resources than any of the staff currently working in the room know, because they've just been using the resources longer. So staff learn things from patrons all the time. And so it's a give and take. So don't be afraid to say, they say, oh, have you looked at the deeds? Oh, I checked these deeds. Have you looked at the probate? Oh, I've already checked for probate for this person, this person, this person, and it just doesn't exist. You may need to look in a different county, various things like that. One of the biggest things to remember in this day and age is that not everything is online. I'm going to repeat that one because that one's critical. Not everything is online. Spartanburg County marriages. They're not online. They're not on microfilm. You physically, actually now you can order there's a form you can fill in and send in your check and they'll send them to you. But before the pandemic, you literally had to walk in with your $5 in cash to look up a marriage license. That was the only way that was available. Yes, it's public record, but it's up to the local clerk of court or probate clerk of court or whichever clerk of court it is as to what is available online, what is available with an index at the local history center nearby. Not everything is online. I'm older than the internet. I remember when the World Wide Web became a thing. This dates me a little bit. I was in grad school the first time. And so you've got to remember that technology changes. Only a very small fraction of genealogical information is online or will ever be digitized or online. So staff may know that we have this book that has this information. We have salvaged from a dumpster the physical log of whatever it was. The local historical association has the jail books that has all the inmates in the jail. Now you can't go over there and research them. If you really need that information, we can sometimes make arrangements for that or borrow them and have them in our room for a researcher coming in, because we have a good relationship back and forth. But we know that those are at that place. So staff can be your biggest asset. They can open doors. They can introduce you to colleagues at other institutions. Huge pet peeve of mine, cite your sources so that you or another researcher can find the information again. I have this great piece of information about an ancestor who was a very early Grayson County, Virginia settler, that during the Revolution, he was a Tory, got shot and then bayoneted, but managed to limp to the mountains and survived. Unfortunately, the person who had that piece of paper that supposedly said that on Ancestry, the picture on Ancestry of that piece of paper, that document, pixelates too badly for reading if you try to blow it up large enough to read. And it cites a collection at the North Carolina State Archives that is not a collection number they have ever used. So we're still trying to figure out where that piece of paper may have come from so that I can get a copy of it that's readable. So make sure you cite your sources and well enough so that somebody else can find the information. So it doesn't, how detailed, there are lots of opinions on detail, but Spartanburg, South Carolina, deed book, DD, page 214, names on the deed. That can get you to that deed. As I was leaving the library to come home and do the program tonight, where I've got better Wi-Fi than I have at the library, and one of our regulars was in the room and he laughed and he said, "Yeah, don't just say it's in that red book on your shelf." Because he happened to be in the room one day when we had this researcher come in demanding that red book that has my family in it. Well, we looked. We searched the catalog by every name in the family tree that the person could think of, because they couldn't remember which family member was in that red book. Yeah, they weren't at our library when they found that red book because it was green. Once we determined couple things. And I think what happened was the staff member on desk who had pulled a couple other people in, including the regular, finally started, well, okay, what county are you researching? Who are you looking for? Okay, well, let me get you settled with XYZ resources while I continue looking for this red book. And then the person was like, oh, this is the book. It was green. I don't know if they were red-green colorblind. I'm not sure. However, had they known that was Union County Cemeteries or whatever the book was, rather than it was red, it would be really helpful. Now, genealogists are not the only ones who come into a library and ask for that red book that had that good story in it. My colleagues who are at the desk that oversees fiction get that all the time. We regularly have displays that are just all orange books or red books or green books, just because it happens so often. It's not horrible, it's a clue, but it's not terribly helpful. So cite your sources so that you can find it again, because you never know when you need the information for the next door neighbor whose granddaughter married into the family. Had that happen multiple times. So do be prepared if you hit a brick wall. No matter how much you believe that X information is at a particular library or archive, you may hit a brick wall. One of our local DAR registrars was saying, yeah, I went to the state archive, was told this particular roll of microfilm was at the state archive. That particular document has never been microfilmed. Now, she found a different roll of microfilm that helped answer part of her question, but she had driven the couple hours to the archive in the other side of Columbia. And had she not had a plan B of information she could look at in place, she would not have been able to make a very profitable trip. So even though she was prepared, she had a citation that someone had written giving that particular roll of microfilm and a number. I mean, it said, this is where I found this. Nope, they found that in person at the county archive, and it's never been put online, and the originals now may be missing. So, you never know. Things happen. Documents walk away, unfortunately, which is why a lot of places keep tightening up on what you can do in the room, what you can bring in. They might need to go through your stuff before you leave if you've been using loose papers and folders and things. So just be prepared. Sometimes you shift. Are there other family members that you can research? Siblings can often help you knock down that wall. I had this researcher in Kansas who had been banging their head against this particular ancestor, could not find the parents. Found a brother's name. Oh, the brother lived in Chicago. The brother was in Who's Who of something, something, something in Chicago. 2 pages on the whole family history. Got that researcher back 4 generations in one look into the brother. So research siblings, go sideways if you can't go back, because different siblings can have different parental names on the death certificates. The information on a death certificate as to who the parents were, where the person was born, etc., is only as reliable as the person giving the information. So just know you may have better information on a different brother or sister. Do research the general history of the area and or the neighbors to see if you can find clues for your primary research query. Sometimes you need to look at, well, you know what? Every time I'm seeing R.A. Rouse and J.J. Rouse in Darlington County. I'm seeing this James Carter and Ellen and Eustace. Because you know what? If you're seeing those three surnames together all the time, they're gonna be witnesses on each other's documents, deeds, etc., possibly in-laws. So you need to research that next round out. And you may just find the right documents and piece it together and figure out who the parents of that third great grandfather are. We'll see. Still working on that one. A lot of that is not online. So happy researching. There's contact information for the Kennedy room there. And we are always happy to get an email from researchers. Let us know what you're looking for. We can get you pointed in the right direction of resources. Are there questions? Cheryl, have you seen any questions come through chat? I haven't seen any questions come through chat. Make sure you grab the handout if you haven't already.
No questions have come up yet. I just wanted to remind you that the handout, we posted another link for that. That should be able to be seen on your screen. It's the last thing that I posted up there.
Awesome.
Okay.
We thank everybody for coming, and we will be doing our next topic first Monday in December, which will be on evaluating resources. So you find a new or different resource. What are ways to evaluate whether it's a good resource, a bad resource, an unreliable resource, or a fantastic resource. And also, as I said, please locate us on YouTube, Spartanburg Public Library's YouTube, and look for the genealogy playlist. And you can see all of our programs for the past year and a half or so. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. And I'm trying to figure out. Cheryl, can you hit stop recording?
Oh.